My disclaimer on that is, yeah, I did this quite a while back, and then I had to recheck it, and then recheck it again. But because I'm not clergy, I have to let you know that everything, all my material came from Catholic sources. Otherwise, I couldn't be doing it. But, except for the pictures that I have in there, just most of them I just Googled. So, but I recently saw a survey that said that over 50% of Americans experienced an event that could be considered miraculous. So tonight I want to take a little poll here of how many of you have experienced something, or maybe you or your wife, that could be considered miraculous. Something maybe like it was something that's too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. Maybe it was a healing that happened a lot faster than you thought, or just something like that. Let's see how many of y'all. So yeah, there we are, a little over 50%. So how many of you are kind of fascinated with miracles? Okay, well, good, because that's all we'll be talking about tonight. So it looks like I'll have a friendly crowd. Now, I didn't use the term miracles here. I used extraordinary mystical phenomena because the term miracles, for one, has been overused a lot. It's like when I used to show up at work all the time, people would say, "Oh, McConnell's here early. It must be a miracle." Like when the Astros beat the Yankees in the playoffs that year, everybody would say, "Oh, that was a miracle." But we're going to be talking about some bigger miracles. And I don't know who took this picture. You can't see the full rainbow. But is Jerome here? I think maybe Jocelyn did. Anybody here take it?
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it when that rainbow was supposed to.
Yeah. But anyway, that's not a miracle. That's just a rainbow.
I did.
So, a while ago, VJ asked me why I wanted to do this, and I was telling him that when I started studying these miracles, all of a sudden I noticed, and I started learning all these things that could happen, and so many people could do them. When I was reading scripture or hearing it in church, and you hear about the miracles that Jesus performed, whatever they were, they used to just kind of go over my head because that was back then, and now it's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that really happens. It happened. It happens not just him. God gifted many people to do these kind of things. So really, to me anyway, it really kind of opened my mind to that, and I hope it does yours too. The miracles we discuss today defy explanation. They are supernatural and absolutely divine intervention. Many of these miracles happen and still happen during deep prayer. That's why the power of prayer transcends scientific understanding. I'll say that again. That's why the power of prayer transcends scientific understanding. Okay, I want to thank Father Dominic for this slide because we were just talking about these things, and he brought that up. I said, "Yeah, Father, that's good. I want to make that into a slide." What is extraordinary mystical phenomena? Okay, spiritual events that characterize an extraordinary outreach by God. It's one of the ways that God uses to communicate with His people. And this is just a few of the things that we're going to talk about here, these examples. I'm going to try to I'm going to see if I've got notes on here, but I can't get that screen to come up.
Probably have to hit escape. And
Did it escape?
You listen up.
Can you see them? Okay, who's the
Yes.
PowerPoint.
It's on there somewhere. All right.
Got your notes up now?
Catholic Church and miracles. Christianity exists because of the miracle of incarnation and the resurrection. As Catholics, we embrace the miracle of the Eucharist each time we're at Mass. Anybody tell me what church that is in the picture? Catholic?
St. Peter's Basilica?
There you go, St. Peter's Basilica. Matthew 16, for I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And there it is, one of the largest churches in the world. Now, that's not really what Jesus meant when he said that, but, you know, Catholics decided to build it anyway, just in case, right? Now, the next couple of slides are going to talk about the church's stance on miracles. Claims of a miracle go through several steps of investigation before reaching the Vatican for final approval. The criteria they use is almost impossibly strict. Only a fraction of the claims brought to the church for investigation are considered worthy of belief and become validated by the Vatican. These extraordinary phenomena are not official church doctrine. While these accounts are part of the mystic's legend, their experiences are considered private revelation and not required for each Catholics. Even with the approved Marian apparition, which I think we have feast days for, with messages for the world, there is no requirement for the faithful to believe in them and can ignore them if they find them distracting or not credible. Of course, that doesn't apply to the miracles of Scripture. Believers like miracles because it's proof that God is interacting with His creation. For non-believers, atheists, skeptics, it's a problem because miracles imply some sort of divine intervention, so they feel the need to counter with some explanation. The Catholic Church appears more ready to disenchant the world rather to enchant it. Tonight, we're going to get enchanted. Start off with Marian apparitions. These are the ones that are approved. So, the last one, Our Lady of Akita, I think that's in Japan, 73. And, of course, Medjugorje is still going on today. But there have been a lot of Marian apparitions reported. In the mid-1900s, there was, in a 50-year period, there was 250 reports from 32 countries. And now it's getting more and more, and like Medjugorje is almost every day now, you know, and so it's kind of makes you wonder, you know, where we're going. These are the most popular ones. You look at Our Lady of Guadalupe in the 1500s. That was a long time ago. They still get 10 million visitors per year. So the diocese has got a trip going there here real soon. And you know that Tilma recently saw a replica of it, and it's it's big and it's really beautiful. And there's things that have happened to it, like it hasn't decayed, of course. It should have decayed 30 years after it was made. acid was spilled on it and it regenerated itself. And I mean, I don't know I haven't really read much about it. Angela was telling me these things because she's planning on this trip and she's preparing for it. But one of the most amazing to me was the scientist that was inspecting it at the time was, he looked into the eyes of the Blessed Mother and with some kind of a scope, right? And in there was Juan Diego and the bishop. But he passed out when he was looking at him, and he said it was because they were moving. And I don't know that they move now, if your eye were in there, but it's a reflective image too. And so it couldn't have been a painting because it's more of a reflective image, like if somebody took a picture with a camera or something. They didn't have cameras then. Anyway, moving on, Lady of Lourdes. Of course, miracles, healings still happen there today. And so a lot of people go there. Lady of Fatima. Yeah, Lady of Fatima, Portugal. Dennis, Dennis, I know you've been there, right? Oh, there.
I've been all.
You been all? There you go. You should come up here and tell them. Fatima was, like, I don't know, thousands of people witnessed that. Medjugorje started in 1981. I don't think they let visitors come till a few years after that. But again, I can't really say much on it because it's not officially approved. But even my mother saw an alleged miracle while she was there, and a lot of people did. So this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Yeah, so they're not in order here. Quite a few of them. So we're starting out with supernatural dreams. Okay? This is divine communication. Now, I'm not talking about visions because visions can be, it's complicated. More diabolic visions there is divine. And supernatural, there's quite a few diabolic dreams. And well, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But St. Thomas Aquinas defined it as this: a divine dream is direct, clear, without confusion, fuzziness, or complication. The guidance is direct and wise, remembering the detail. Okay, because I used to wonder how these people that had these dreams and they would talk about it and they knew everything. It's like they didn't even write it down. You know, how do you remember all that stuff? I don't remember anything about it. Hardly at all. Sometimes it tells of a future event, and sometimes it's sent to others simultaneously. Job 33, for God does speak in a dream, in a vision of the night. Similar references in Numbers 12. St. John Bosco, one of my favorite, heavyweight. That guy had a lot of gifts. In the 1800s, started having dreams at age 9, and it continued for 60 years. Some so real, he would waken exhausted. Yeah, that's a book right there. I found that up in there. What does it say? 40 Dreams of St. John Bosco. And many saints received communication from God in their dreams. In the Old Testament, of course, you had Jacob, Joseph, Pharaoh, Solomon, Daniel, and so on. The New Testament, quite a few there too. Remember, angel appeared to Joseph and told him to marry. And then later told him to flee to Egypt to escape the wrath of the Pharaoh, with Jesus. And then again, to go back to Israel. And, there's quite a few. Okay, so the ecstatic state, that's why I put this one up front because it's also called religious ecstasy. This is, a lot of the saints get in this ecstatic state and when they perform their other miracles. It's where the human body goes dormant, usually during intense prayer. and does not react to any stimuli in a normal way. Can y'all hear me all right back there?
Yes.
I mean, you can partner or something and they don't react, their eyes don't move or anything. It's described as an infusion of divine love and mysteries into the body and soul. During this state, the ecstatic often receives prophecies, revelations, divine messages, and so on and so forth. St. Paul described it as caught up in the third heaven. Now, this surprises me. St. Teresa of Avila, heavyweight, again, she could do a lot of things. We've got a good story about her. Age 43. I thought she would have had a lot younger than that. Venerable Mary of Arguin, age 18. St. Peter, 6. Catherine of Siena, 4. And there was a lot of them that were at a young age like that. Can you imagine that? Being that young and okay, so the picture is definitely not a Catholic source. Who is that? That's Captain Kirk. And then Scotty or what? Oh, I can't tell.
Riker.
So this is like, it's called agility, but it's like teleporting. It's the ability to transport oneself from place to place instantly. Many saints were transported from one place to another and returned in the same way. It's well documented. Anthony of Padua was in Italy, and he supernaturally learned his father was on trial for murder in Portugal. So he mysteriously transported to Lisbon in time to prove his father's innocence. And what he did is he took authorities to the grave and commanded the corpse to talk. So that the corpse proved his innocence. Now, so this slide, a couple of the others here come up, or talk about transportation, different modes of transportation, because, you know, we have all kind of ways of getting around now pretty quick, and they didn't back then, right? So they were gifted with these abilities. And, you know, these gifts, they're not for show and tell, they're for a purpose, and for people in need or whatever like that. Well, saints and holy people could move at great speeds, mainly to help those in great need. Walking several miles in minutes, walking across rivers, using their cloak to glide across the river, and they get to the other side and the cloak's not even wet. Often, they're not even aware of what took place in between the destinations. You know, they'd start out and then they would just go, and they don't really know what happened. And there's a list of the most noteworthy ones. When I have a list like this, these are not exhaustive lists normally. There's usually a whole bunch of them that don't have room to put this many in. Saying hi with this first one on the list. He ran into a chapel that was set on fire by invaders to get the Blessed Sacrament. And while he was in there, the Blessed Mother told him to get her statue. And he looked at that big statue and he's like, no, it's too big and heavy. I can't carry that thing out. But he went and grabbed it. and it was light. It didn't weigh anything. He picked it up and he took off. And there was a river there, and he slid across the river to get away. These things happen. You're all looking at me like, this is the way you started. This is a good one. Y'all gonna like this one. By location. Occupying two spaces at the same time. This generally happens in the ecstatic state, but not always. You either see the physical body or an apparition. Seeing the physical body doesn't happen as often as more of an apparition. The targets are generally people in serious need, of course, while other times it's to comfort the dying, something like that. Blessed Catherine Emmerich was a frequent bilocator. And she said, the guardian angel calls me and I follow. Bilocation of the Venerable Mary of Agua. Venerable Mary Agua bilocated in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona over 500 times in just a few years there. You see that? By order of our Lord to teach the natives about the Catholic faith. She was known to, they called her the Lady in Blue because she always had the blue, what's called cape. And bishops on both continents knew about this and they questioned her extensively. I'll talk more about her later. Because you got to remember, there's different tribes everywhere she went. They all speak different languages. And this lady comes to them, they don't know what to think, where she came from and all that. And she speaks their language. One of them, one tribe actually, they shot her with an arrow. And when she was in the ecstatic state, I think she was laying down, she fell off the table. But anyway, she got up and stood up, pulled the arrow out, and she said, "Now do you believe me?" By the way, so I have, Angela was there the year before last with that group from Victoria, World Youth Day. And while she's in Spain, she hopped on a bus there and went to the convent there. And so I have anyone's interest. It's a huge convent. And she picked this up while she was there. And also, by the way, so, well, I'll talk about this later. Padre Pio. Yeah, 1968. Some of you may, that's when he died, so some of you may know about this already, or if not, maybe your parents did. This is during World War II. Let's see, the Americans, the Polish, and the English were doing a bombing mission. Trying to bomb a German's weapon depot, but it was located near this monastery in Italy. And back then, you know, the carpet bomb. So Padre Pio was worried that, you know, they were going to hit the monastery. So he bilocated up in the sky and in front of the cockpit there, in front of the plane, and he was signaling the pilots to turn around. And they're just, you know, like, what's going on? They were dumbfounded. And I think the first mission, I think they turned around. And of course, they got laughed at when they went, you know, and so they sent them back up, or they sent another squadron up. And same thing happened. But this time, Padre Pio took control of the plane from outside, dropped the bombs over a wooded area out there, and then forced the plane to turn around. And so, you know, General Rossini got wind of this, and he says, "I got to see this for myself." And same thing happened. And one of the pilots recognized Padre Pio because he had the stigmatas, and for Padre Pio, it goes all the way through his hands and his feet, but you know, they recognized him. That's the Padre Pio up there. And so after the war, General Rossini and some of the pilots, that's another picture, got together and talked about it. And General Rossini converted to Catholicism. Of course he did. Levitation is another fun one. It's suspended in air at the great heights and gliding across the ground. Now, these, again, this is, you know, Google pictures. You know, they didn't have cameras back then, so they were doing paintings, except for this one, the middle one, Father Giovanni. So that's really the normal, when the saints levitated. It was normally just a little bit off the ground. But St. Joseph of Cupertino, called him a flying friar, he was observed over 100 times over the heads of others like that. they put chains on him to hold him down because he didn't really want to be flying around that much. And Thomas Aquinas, he was often levitating while he was saying Mass. And of course, everybody saw him. Now, St. Francis of Assisi, over here on the right, he could go high above the ground, real high. Venerable Mary of Agreda, she would stay levitated 2-3 hours after communion. And St. Teresa of Avila called her a reluctant levicator. She would have nuns hold her down when she walked out to communion. She was embarrassed to have people know. Reading of hearts. This is looking into the souls of others to see if they are in a state of grace or living in sin. They would see a person's past, present, and future events. This is also what's common with sin. People would help. Priests would help people remember their sins during confession. How would you like that? Padre Pio was famous for this. I asked Father Dominic, I said, can you do that, Father? Because I can't remember things like that. Yeah,
You don't have to examine your conscience, you just say, Father.
Yeah. Tell me what I did. Yeah. But then he starts bringing up stuff on the way back, Kind of like my wife does, It's like, I don't know. I think women in general, they got a better memory. That's why there's more women saints in heaven, right? They remember all their sins. I told my wife, I said, she recalls stuff from years ago. Did I even know you back then? I said, why don't you do a confession? So people travel long distances to go to confession with him. He would tell them what sins they haven't confessed. So these were a list of saints who also could do that. Multiplication. This is a miraculous increase of substance that is used for the benefit of others, like when Jesus fed the multitudes. Now, that seems to be one of the ones that all these naysayers come up with first. They want to explain the natural way that it happened. It didn't have to be miraculous. It could have been natural. Back then, people wore cloaks and, they carried food in their pockets and that sort of thing like that. And so these people, just when they were there, it was a lesson on sharing, and they, shared their food, right? But, they were there. Jesus had them there for 3 days, right? And they had to travel for a long distance. I don't know that they wanted to carry that much food. That would have been a lot of weight. And still have enough left over after all those people to have 7 or 10 where's the baskets? 12. One time 12, one time 7. Yeah. I don't know why they can't think beyond the realm of our natural laws. I know it's hard to do, but the Holy Spirit doesn't care about our laws of physics. The Holy Spirit doesn't care about our laws of natural medicine. Do they, Mike? No, never have. It was no big deal for Jesus to multiply the loaves. He did it several times. And then God allowed other people to do the same thing when they were in need. Okay. So St. Joseph of Cupertino would hold his hands over what little food there was to eat, and it would multiply. Of course, they had to invoke God, right? They had to pray for it. St. Peregrine frequently multiplied wheat and wine during the famine. Many saints could feed people with one loaf of bread by invoking the Lord's intercession. There's a list of all the saints. The picture is Elijah, and he prayed for God to multiply the flour and oil for the woman and her son. And they had enough for a year. Next slide. Invisibility, mystically hidden. Right? Saints would become mystically hidden before the eyes of witnesses. In Acts 12, remember when Peter escaped from jail? So they had him, I believe they had him chained. They had him chained to jail, and he had guards sleeping on either side of him, and then out in the hallway, they had a couple of guards out there. And an angel came to him, took the chains off, and they walked out. In fact, when they walked down the hall, the big door to get out, the door automatically opened. St. Francis of Paolo escaped from a crowd of enthusiastic fans and went again in front of the king that was going to arrest him. St. Clement Mary Hofbauer disappeared in a cloud while praying at the altar, seen by 100. And St. Gerald Magyar also disappeared in church. This is a good one. Infused knowledge. This is a gift from God that is beyond one's intellectual abilities. It's like a flood of intellectual illumination. Many saints in Gaiety had the gift and were able to explain in great detail the most abstruse mysteries of faith. St. Catherine of Siena was probably the most well known for this. St. Joseph of Cupertino, Hildegard of Clet, and Hardy Reed were consulted by scholars and masters of theology who were amazed at their wisdom. Now, a little closer to home, the Venerable Jean B. Mattel, he was the person responsible for starting the Word of the Incarnate Word of the Blessed Sacrament and the Blessed Sacrament in France, which later came to Hallettsville and Victoria. She was graced with many gifts. She couldn't read or write, but at age 6 she wanted to learn Latin so she could tell, so she would know what was going on. So she prayed about it. And then one day, it was a few years later, she was 16, while she was at Mass, it just happened. She understood, she could read, speak, write, and so she's talking to the priest. He says, "How did you learn that?" But later, she wrote many letters and manuscripts. Arignosis is the ability to instantly identify people, places, or things that are blessed or consecrated. They can find true relics and can also tell if one is fake. Saints were used for this to identify bones in graves. Upon receiving communion, they can feel the presence of our Lord in a different way. Blessed Civilian Viscasi, Teresa Newman, and Mary Janney possessed the gifts of detecting if a host was consecrated or not. Others could see Christ in a host. And of course, in Luke 1:44, remember when John the Baptist recognized Jesus in the world. In Idia, it's a mystical fast. Kind of sounds like not eating, right? In Idia. So this is long-term fast. Total absence of all food and drink beyond the limits of nature. Many saints or holy persons have fasted for years, even decades. St. Angela for 12 years, Teresa Nolan, no food for however many years that is, 1922 to 62. And Walter Robin, 49 years. 1932 till she died, and many others too. They were able to continue a normal lifestyle with only the bread of life. The most documented and well studied was Teresa Nami, which was stigmatic. She fasted from 1922 to 1962. And she was strong, energetic, bled profusely at times, and even gained weight. This gift mystifies the best minds in the world of science and medicine. Supernatural insomnia. This is going without sleep for long periods of time, up to a year. These saints were energetic, had no adverse health effects. And that's a list of them there. Can you imagine how much work you could get done around here if you didn't eat or sleep? Stigmata, y'all are familiar with stigmatas, but maybe some of this you're not. When God's chosen people will spontaneously receive the appearance of wounds from his passion. The gift is given to the stigmatic only for the benefit of others, of course, as a representation of the crucified Christ. A few days after Padre Pio died, his wounds disappeared, signifying his work was done. The wounds don't get infected, but some bleed, and mostly on Fridays. Some have only one wound, and some people have many more. You know, the scourging, from the crown, the hole through the crown of thorns, and other things like that. Exchange of hearts. The heart is considered the center of all emotions. The mystic's heart is removed and replaced with presumably the heart of our Lord. Many saints have physical wound and testimony of this phenomenon. There is a list of some of the saints. Moving on. Wounds of the heart. It's a mystical wound that is directly in the heart or on the external of the heart. It resembles the shape of an arrow or a lance. Autopsies have testified heart wounds of 14 stigmatics in the 19th century study. This picture, a picture of Teresa Avila. When Angela was at the monastery, went to the basilica there, and of course cathedral, in Avila, Teresa's cathedral in Avila, and the picture was in there. Anyway, so I have this book too that shows this is the monastery. And there's some stories about her. So she described it as a long golden spear with a hot tip that an angel used to pierce her heart. The pain was excruciating, but also sweet, and left her with a fire of love for God. Cardiac phenomena. Some of them have audible heartbeats from a distance. St. Philip Neri is one. Very large hearts. Imprints of the passion on the heart. Saints and blesseds were told these things by God, or saw them in a vision. Saint Veronica Gillian drew a sketch of her imprints on her heart. She drew it so well. And when they did the autopsies, it was just like what she had shown. Saint Clare of Montefalco had a large heart with distinct symbols of the passion in the cardiac tissue. And upon death, of course, the autopsy confirmed that too. All these are indications of God's immense love for us. So, bodily elongation. The body and the limb elongates and shrinks to noticeable proportions. Some stigmatics can control the elongation and shrinkage. Blessed Stephanie, her arm would grow while reliving Jesus being nailed to the cross. So she would hold her arms up. I guess this might have been during the Station of the Cross. And one of her arms would grow, and then you know, she would bring it down and it would come back. Veronica Latelli could extend her neck by nearly 1 foot. Okay, Rhonda. Okay, I gotta tell you a story. I heard it direct from Rhonda. So we go to my wife has cancer treatments in Mexico. We go down there and one of the other ladies that goes too is on the same schedule, Rhonda, and so we were eating dinner with them one night, and they're a very religious couple. And she was telling us a story about when she was born. She had polio, as a young girl, and her leg was short. It didn't grow like the other one, so she had to wear, a platform on her shoes, one shoe. And so they were at a revival, her and her husband to be, and after the revival, they stayed at the house of one of the speakers there. And when they were in the house, and several people were in there, and several people stayed there, and over the fireplace was a boot, and it had a platform on it. And so her husband, well, they weren't married yet. Later on, they got married. He said, "What's the story with the boot?" And the guy explained, "Well, there was a fellow here. He had one leg shorter than the other, and I prayed over him, and his leg grew." And he says, "Really?" He says, "Rhonda's got the same thing." And she said, he got all excited about it and everything. He said, "Oh, let me pray over you, let me pray over you." And, she was a little afraid and everything, but okay. And so she lay down on the couch, and he was just down there praying over her leg. And she said, I could feel it moving. And she said, I didn't want to look up because, he was praying. I didn't want to disturb him. But her husband saw it moving. And then so he got through and he said to get up. And so she got up, and it was longer than the other leg now. And I guess God has a sense of humor sometimes. So he says, he says, let me fix that. And so he starts praying again. Lord, Father, make her equal and make both legs the same length. And I don't know what all she was telling me the prayers because I not, but she said, I felt my leg moving again. And so when he was done, she got up and they were equal, and she didn't even wear a platform shoe anymore either. Anyway, you can take that for what it is. How about she told me, but she's the same age as you. Very quiet woman too. Subtlety is the ability to pass through solid objects. This is not a big one. I didn't see this too much, but Venerable Anthony, Marville, St. Patrick, St. Raymond, St. Martin were said to have entered dwellings through closed doors. Miraculous healings, you all know about that. Thing is, it's very difficult for healings to meet the requirements of miraculous by the Vatican. That being said, there are many, many remarkable healings by saints and beati, giving sight to the blind, even for those without pupils, restoring hearing, casting out demons, etc. Many healings have happened and still happen at various Marian apparition sites. Many healings are attributed to saints after their death, praying for their intercession at their grave sites, and other ways. Incorruptibility. Bodies of saints remain incorrupt for hundreds of years. No embalmment, no coffin, packed in lime. Some of them were still incorrupt. Some appear to be alive. Some bleed fresh blood and have fragrance of flowers. Some revert to the appearance of their youth shortly after death. That's new, I didn't know that. Y'all remember this picture of St. Wilhelmina, Lancaster? It was in the news, I don't know, not that long ago. Sometime last year, maybe last summer or so. In Kansas City. They exhumed her,
Was she a black man?
yeah, black nun.
Yeah, I heard about her.
Yeah. Yeah, she was with that Benedictine order, and that's the way they buried. They just a wooden coffin, a pine box, and no embalmment or anything like that. Anyway, they were moving, she'd been dead for 4 years, and they were moving her gravesite. I don't remember why. They might have had been removing everybody's, but when they dug her up, they noticed that her coffin was damaged down there at the bottom end where the feet are and everything. And they looked in there and could see her leg was still fine, you know, and her clothing and everything. And it should have been already, you know, long gone. Anyway, that's her right there. There's 102 cases of incorruption of canonized saints, beati, and venerables. Quite a few. Supernatural empery over nature and creatures. Saint Francis of Assisi, birds and wildlife gathered around him while he was preaching or praying. It's in the picture there. Now, he would go to the waterfront and recite his sermons because people didn't seem to like his sermons too much, you know. But when he did, the fish would gather around him. And people got wind of that, so they would come out to watch the fish. But while they were there, they heard his sermons. They started liking them, so they started going back to church. Other saints that commanded wolves and wild beasts. Now, opening springs from rocks was common. Many fountains and springs were named after saints, but in Revelation 7 it says, the Lamb who is at the center of the throne will lead them to the springs of water of life. This happens so much, again, going back to transportation. You know, they're going a long way, and they run out of water, and they go the wrong way, and just have to go further. And so they were able to get water from them. St. Vincent Ferreira stopped the storm so people could hear him preaching. But that got their attention, huh? Several other saints could do that. Oh, yeah, so February 10th, it was a memorial of St. Scholastica. This is where this is where her twin brother came to visit her. She was dying. You all remember that? So the story is, he had to leave because he had to get back to the monastery because he's not supposed to be out overnight. But she said, no, don't leave. We're still talking. We still have a lot to talk about. He didn't know. I don't think he knew she was dying, so she was there. And so all of a sudden he started storming. And he says, "You did that, didn't you?" She said, "Yes, I did." Telekinesis, the ability to move objects without being connected to them, just like Yoda. Communion at a distance happened a lot. It's where the host goes from the priest's hand through the air to the recipient. And there's a list of the saints that happened to, and also several other. They aren't all saints either. Beati and blessed. Venerable. St. Andrew of the Cross was the most famous for this, reportedly receiving 100 of these communions. And once there was a dying nun where the host the priest placed the host on a corporal that laid on her chest, and when he did, it just disappeared.
You're aware in Yoakum that there is a story with a Yarsh that received First Communion at the Yellow Bank, which is curved. I teach at RCIA. I have a deal with Joey Ockley. Suppose she wanted communion so bad, they were missing a host, and she received first communion before she was supposed to. That's supposed to happen in church.
Wow, yeah.
It was Bishop, Father Forrest, who turned out to be Bishop Forrest, is the one that told the story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so some of these saints, like I say, that most of the time the host would fly across to you know, the nuns, they probably sat in the front row, you know how they do. And so they may not have to go very far, but most of the time they would go up there, and when they were up there, they would just go like that, right? But some of them, when it got to their mouth, it would just, as soon as it touched their tongue, it would disappear. They didn't have to talk. It would just be absorbed into them. Telekinesis also means having knowledge of events that are happening or just happened. Pope Pius V knew the outcome of the naval battle Lavaca. He was watching it from his window there, see, but the battle wasn't in sight. But he knew about Don Juan's victory right away. St. Catherine had mystical visits with different saints. And she became good friends with other saints even though they never met. Next slide. These flames of love. We'll do that. This is where high body temperatures around the heart can be unbearable and require cold applications. Clothes may get scorched and skin blistered, but it doesn't hurt the body. It's said to be a gift that manifests for the intense love of God. St. Catherine of Siena happened after communion many times. St. Philip of Nero would glow. St. Padre Pio broke several thermometers as well as all the scientific rules. You know, he's the most studied because wasn't that long ago, right? Lights of rays of love. Lights of rays that come from a person's body or wounds of the stigmatic. Also halos. Halos are real, you know, not just in pictures. Occurred primarily during deep prayer. Can appear as a beam of light coming down upon them and radiating outward. It can be embarrassing to the mystic because it's very noticeable to the point of filling the entire room with bright light. It calls out their graces, and they might prefer to keep that hidden. St. Stephen lit up while he was being stoned to death, as well as several other martyrs. Yeah, you'd think when that happens they would stop throwing stones and run, right? But I don't know, I think they thought that was demonic or something like that. But it wasn't dark, it was light. John Bosco, again, at times would get a halo and sometimes glow in deep prayer or with elevating the host. There was multiple cases of these, and of course they were witnessed and recorded. You know, I was talking earlier about the naysayers and the miracles that Jesus did, but those were recorded as well, not just by the Christians, by the Jewish people and the pagans too. So, yeah, the bottom picture is the transfiguration of Jesus. Next slide. The gift of tears and the gift of tongues. Jesus wept for people of Jerusalem in Luke 19. Peter wept bitterly after denying Jesus in Matthew 26. Padre Pio and other priests would weep while saying Mass. Some saints would weep in man's disregard to God. Francis of Assisi, a cheerful saint, wept so much he had eye problems. St. Dominic would cry so loud that people could hear him at a distance. The gift of tongues is different than speaking in tongues. Saints will speak in their own language and be understood by those who speak a different language. Mark 16, these signs will accompany those who believe. They will speak new languages. Mary of Agada. Okay, so Mary of Agada, she's the one that came here to Texas and spoke to the Indians and the different tribes. She was speaking in her language, and they all understood her in their language. And there were several others did too. They covered South America, Central America, and North America. Many people around the world converted by listening to these saints. Odor of sanctity is a supernaturally sweet fragrance emitted by saints at their death during prayer in the ecstatic state. Corpses and grave sites also, people could smell that. Blood from stigmatics. St. Veronica Gilead emitted fragrance from her wound that penetrated the entire convent. Maria Rose, the little Rose, called her, also gave a sweet aroma from her wounds. Witnessed by many and defied scientific explanation once again. It is interpreted as a testimony to the holiness of an individual. The odor of sin, some saints could smell a stench from people in need of confession. In some cases, the odor was so strong it would make them sick. St. Joseph of Cupertino could walk around town and find places of sin. We could use that now, huh? Once he found the location of a sorcerer. And there's some other saints that could do that as well. Blood prodigies. Sweating blood and tears of blood. From agony while in prayer. Stigmatics. Rudigards, Veronica Gilead, Gemma, and Blessed Catherine. There's a lot of stigmatics. Stigmata bleeding at certain times. And then, of course, images and icons bleeding at certain times. Anybody ever seen that? The images, the icons they have, like those. Sometimes they're crying. Liquefaction of blood from saints years after death. There's a picture of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, fervent prayer. He was sweating blood. Locutions. That's the last slide. Locutions are one of the most common mystical phenomena. Apparitions that are heard physically or in the heart. It usually happens during prayer, but can be at any time during physical consciousness. The words heard or felt are very real and convincing. Voices in the Old Testament were heard directly from God. Voices in the New Testament are mostly from an angel of God. Saint Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa, right, began her charitable ministry after receiving a locution from Jesus in 1947. Saint Teresa of Avila had many actual locutions without words. She says that's the way you communicate with death. So I'm going to tell you a story about Teresa of Avila. And I'm not being disrespectful because she wrote it down. But when she would go to the bathroom, be sitting there doing nothing else, might as well pray, right? So she was sitting on the commode taking care of business, and the devil comes to her because, a lot of times when you're have a lot of sanctity, the devil's always trying to penetrate you too, right? So the devil comes to her and he says, "Don't you feel ashamed of yourself by praying while you're sitting on the commode?" And she says, "Look here, what comes out of my mouth is for the Lord." She said, "What comes out of the other end is for you." Hope you guys enjoyed this. And I've got some books over here, this Compendium of Miraculous, where most of my material came from, saint books, and some Catholic approved websites there. So